I had a hobby too. Mine happened to be guns and ballistics. And I studied guns and ballistics as much as I could, and I wrote an article about high velocity.
So out of all my years working at Weatherby, the last 5 have been some of the most exciting. Working with Adam, with him running the company.
And to think that I get the opportunity of carrying on my grandfather's legacy 75 years later here in Sheridan, Wyoming, I mean, it really is a dream come true.
Oh, I'm home. Thank God I'm home.
On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast.
Here we go. Welcome to On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast. We have a very special guest here in our podcast studio today, J. Mack, or Officer Jeremy Mack with the National Forest Service. Welcome to Weatherby.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, along with Jeremy, we've got Micah, our creative and marketing specialist, content production guru. We got Mac,
howdy,
also our content guru, and me, Luke Torkelson here. So, Jeremy, we want to dive in to you and what you do for the National Forest Service. I don't think I fully realized until I met you that the Forest Service has law enforcement officers.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty common. I started off in fighting fire for the Forest Service, and I bet I did it for 4 or 5 seasons before I even saw an LEO, which is what we call a law enforcement officer. So, yeah, and it's when you think about the numbers and the exposure, I mean, I think there's maybe 650 or so personnel in LE&I, or law enforcement investigations.
Across the whole country?
Across the whole country, yep.
650?
650.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, you can imagine.
So
you can go a while without seeing them unless you're...
So let's boil that down into just here in the Bighorn National Forest. Is that what you primarily support, is Bighorn?
Correct, yep. So I'm assigned to the Bighorn National Forest. We're national in what we call also regional assets. Region is an administrative unit of the National Forest. So, for example, this is Region 2, part of Region 2 in the National Forest system. Okay. That includes Colorado and Wyoming.
And so you're assigned to the Bighorns. I mean, we're not the biggest national forest around, but it's a big area. Are you the only one here? Are there multiple in your sector? Like, are there other, how many law enforcement agents are patrolling the Bighorns or what have you?
So we've got the Bighorns, if I remember right, is about 1.1 million acres.
That's it.
And we're pretty lucky. We have 2 full-time field-going LEOs, law enforcement officers, myself and Sheridan, another officer in Buffalo. So just geographically, so you can imagine geography plays.
So you just split that 50-50. So you got
500,000.
Yeah, 550,000.
Wow.
It's more guided by access.
Okay.
So you can imagine Highway 16, Highway 14, 14A. So it depends. So geography is big about how efficient our workload is. So here it makes sense. We divide it north half, south half. Sheridan, Bighorn counties, and then Washakie and Johnson counties.
That makes sense.
Yep. Just for where you can go, what relationships you can build, because a lot of our job is really the relationships with our partners and the public.
So it's maybe less to do with access as far as how many LEOs are assigned. It's more to do with, or it's less to do with size, more with access. Like you might have a massive park, but if you can get to 1/3 of it easily, you might have the same amount of officers.
Yeah, and you'll see that in places like Alaska. I mean, think about
the
logistics of moving over huge swaths or having mountain ranges, so on and so forth. So then you get into the special use of aircraft or boats or whatever it might be.
Okay.
So I've seen you a couple times when I've taken the family up on the weekend and just usually run into you on 14 or 14A, somewhere up there.
Yep.
So what's a typical day look like for you? Do you just cruise the highway, or what's
that really varies depending on
writing speeding tickets?
Right. So that is not what we want to be doing. Not the best use of our time for the most part. So I've been here for just under 2 years. We moved here in June 2019. So from California, Northern California, most recently, up on the North Coast. So yeah, the kind of the gig here, it depends on, it's very seasonal in nature. Is it hunting season? What's access? What are the roads? If the roads are closed or open, we have to adapt to whatever the current, enforcement challenges are. So wintertime, one day maybe just driving the roads, checking parking lots, trying to get the word out about the state trails programs, making sure people have their stickers, paying for that stuff.
The OHV stickers?
OHV or OSV, over snow vehicles for this time of year.
Okay.
So that's a fairly efficient use of time, is driving a highway, stopping at Granite Pass, stopping at Bear Lodge, talking to folks, trying to get some feedback, because again, I can't say it enough, a lot of the effectiveness of what we do is what we get from the public and our partners.
Right.
If just me in 1.1 million acres is not very efficient use of time.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what we do is based on what do we hear from the public, complaints we get, partnerships with the sheriff's office. Maybe a deputy's up and has some kind of contact that's of interest to us and not really in his legal realm.
So networking, just because it spreads so thin, talking to people and getting an idea what's going on in your area.
Where Game and Fish would have like their tip line for poaching. Anything from the public is really what our bread and butter is, taking the information and trying to make use of it. So.
Okay. So are there like cases? Like what are you're just trying to make sure everybody's safe, or are you like? I guess it varies from season to season, obviously. But like, let's talk about hunting season.
Okay.
What's a typical day in October look like? October 15th, opening day of rifle elk season. What are you doing?
So, I'm sure you guys know the emphasis with that is state Game and Fish here. Mm-hmm. Their main priority is the hunting regulations, laws, and the animals.
Right.
A lot of what we do, the biggest impacts on the national forest. So our job is safety of the public, safety of our employees, and then protection of natural resources. So in the context of hunting season, you don't just have hunting going on. You have people coming in from all over the nation, all over the place to use the forest to hunt. That's one thing they're doing, but they're riding ATVs.
Recreating.
Campfires.
Mm-hmm.
They've got, whatever it might be, motor vehicle use. So whether it's damage, we're trying to investigate some damage to natural resources, roads. As you know, hunting season's kind of that time when the weather starts to fluctuate. You get, so when we have wet stuff, we have damage. When we have freezing, thawing, people trying to access. So a lot of what we do is you can kind of generalize sanitation issues, government property issues, occupancy and use, which is like the campgrounds. Are people paying their fees? Are they following the noise regulations? So again, just to boil it down, the Game and Fish stuff is not necessarily directly what are you over your limit on your fish? Are you shooting the right caliber weapon? That's Game and Fish law. We'll dabble in that with a few code of federal regulations that we enforce. Do you have a license, for example? We'll enforce that, but we don't go into the weeds.
Right on.
Okay. So like boundaries, though, that'd probably be your area.
So there's going into those weeds. I say we don't go into that. We assist. So maybe I'll see something that I know is a violation. I'll check. He meets all my requirements as far as federal law is concerned. They're not off-road illegally, but I document at that point. I'm a law enforcement officer, but I'm also to some degree a witness. So I talked to John Smith and I check, and he's got everything in order. He's not doing anything wrong. But I'm like, this looks like a state violation might be occurring here. I can call a game warden or document,
hand it off,
photograph, videotape, pass the information on for follow up later.
So even if the case is that just if you see something going on in state land, or you're federally employed and you're working just on the national forest, if those violations are taking place, is there any sort of mix-up between that, like where your departments have to work together if the violations or whatever are taking place on the forest versus like BLM or just state land?
So that's what I was talking about was on federal property. So we have two different things we can talk about. One is authority, which is what you can do legally. What authority do I have to say you are I'm seizing this property or whatever. Authority is what you can do. Jurisdiction is where you can do it. Okay. So everything I do is on or adjacent to my jurisdiction, which is the national forest. The authority that I have, generally speaking, and this changes, it gets pretty complex wherever you go. Generally speaking, the authority I have is federal law as it pertains to the national forest regulations. So if there's a state crime is committed, that's where I step back. I can document, take a look at it, call for assistance. Hold the scene, maybe make sure no evidence leaves, whatever it might be.
Gotcha.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That sort of, and it segues. I don't know if we want to get into it
or kind of jumping quick
away
into it, but I was thinking the same thing.
I'm thinking something along the lines of, I can't remember if they're It's federally regulated, I believe, or federally protected. I'm thinking of like things like we have grizzly bears here. When a grizzly bear is shot, I know they go full CSI on that. Is that you guys, and does that fall into? Because I can't remember if it's a state or federal, whatever who does it.
I think everybody gets involved at that point. It's a party.
I think everybody does. I don't know if everybody wants to. so like with many things, you know, everything there's different topics, and some of them are touchy.
Sure.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife is the short answer.
Okay.
And state game and fish, because you've got within the state, a grizzly bear is wildlife, which is managed by the state.
Mm-hmm.
But U.S. Fish and Wildlife, it's also federally.
Yeah.
There's federal interest.
They're on the list.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
I was curious about that.
Yep.
Well, I was more so, I thought you were taking in the direction of like, you know, as a witness, what can we do as hunters or, you know, hikers or somebody just recreating that think we see something, well, in my case, I saw something blatantly wrong. You know, I'm hiking in, you know, busting it, trying to get to an awesome spot, and guys go flying by me on, you know, ATVs. And it's
that
like,
happens to me this year, too.
Yes.
Specify on a
ton of
non-ATV
effort.
trail.
Yeah, I spent a ton of effort getting way in there, and then all of a sudden I see people zipping around on motorized vehicles. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, and they know. I mean, because they know that everybody's spread so thin, and so it's like, what can we do, kind of, you know, on our side to kind of either document or witness or just be more helpful in case we pass that information along to you or Game and Fish or anybody really. That what are some things that people can do to help, you know, when we see violations?
Is there like Forest Service 911? Like, what do you do?
It's not. I mean, so I mean, we dispatch with through the state, the state patrol. So that's always kind of a hang up is you know, how do you get word to the right people at the right time?
Right.
But on the same note, somebody can contact the sheriff's office and they'll get word to us as well. We just don't have that public number, like call this number, like I said, the poaching hotline.
Okay.
And really, so most of the laws and the regulations that we enforce are misdemeanors. And what that means is very rarely, for most of the stuff we're going to see here, is it handcuffs and going to jail, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. You're writing a citation.
Yep. So we do a lot of collection of information. That's for perfect for, you know, the great question that you asked, and that's probably one of the most helpful things that we see in the field is what do people give to us that we can work with. There's a ton of people, especially here. We're super fortunate. People love this place, rightly so. You know, it's a pretty fantastic place.
We try to not talk about how awesome.
I mean, it's basically horrible.
Yeah.
We're not talking about where we're at here.
He came from California, and it's even worse here. So,
so really, I mean, number one is how to communicate with us, which is not always the easiest. You can call the Forest Service office. Mm-hmm. You can call the sheriff's office. They'll get a hold of me. So I work with the law enforcement side, which makes it kind of hard to get a hold of. But, you know, I give my card out on a daily basis. If you guys need anything, give me a call, and I tell people that. But the basics, I mean, nowadays, everybody has their phone, which is amazing. There's good resources out there for mapping. There's good resources. Everybody's got cameras. So really, that's what I try to tell even our own employees. We have a lot of field going folks, whether biologists or whatever. And I tell people, don't be afraid to pull out your camera. You can take a GPS point off of it. You can look at it. You can take a photo of a license plate, a description of a person.
Well, I didn't think about like geotagging a picture and be like, hey, look, there's an ATV, and I'm 4 miles from the nearest ATV trail. So that homie's not doing it right.
Or even Onyx. I mean, everybody uses Onyx nowadays. We have our own Aventa map. Instead of trying to geotag something and worry about technology, screenshot.
Yeah.
Just screenshot.
Oh yeah.
It shows me where you were with your GPS coordinate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that stuff really comes in handy. I mean, it's some of the best success we have on those follow-ups. And some of these follow-ups will take weeks because, say you know, somebody drives by on an ATV and you snap a photo of their sticker, or they're tearing up a trail with it. You can get that to me, and you know, we've got the luxury of time for these kind of misdemeanors and crimes. So, I mean, I can go to somebody's house in Buffalo 3 months later when I finally track down who that sticker went to through the state.
Gotcha.
So.
That can be tricky. I've bought a lot of those stickers, and it's just like a little logbook that you buy at the local sporting goods store, you know, and it's like, man, do those ever get all the way back to the state?
But even like a license plate from a vehicle, I mean, the better information we collect, date, time, location, what the incident was about, and any kind of photo, because that's, again, we can airdrop it, we can text it. Pretty straightforward and pretty easy, but all that stuff really helps.
So for a large portion of the Bighorns, there's not cell service.
Correct.
At least that I'm aware of. So how do you have a satellite phone? Like, how is it just a radio? Like, how do you get in touch every day with, if the field office needs to call you or whatever and be like, hey, we got an emergency over on Bald Peak, go check it out?
So again, I mean, working with state dispatch, the state of Wyoming is fantastic with that kind of stuff. We actually have pretty darn good communications compared to many places I've worked.
Really?
The state dispatch system is actually fantastic here.
So it's a radio, or?
It is a radio,
okay.
Yep. So we try to keep all of our options open. I'm always checking, stopping in, swinging into cell phone sections somewhere on the highway or up in the mountains where I know where it's at, and do I get a text of something going on? We have a Forest Service radio system. We have the state radio system. We have county radio systems. So just kind of a mishmash of all that kind of stuff, and trying to fill the gaps where there are some.
Awesome. What month do you see the most problems happen?
From what I've seen in the short time, it's kind of those transition, those shoulders, because of that weather change. Some of the biggest stuff we have here, so obviously hunting season is huge.
Sure.
Just the number of people, the volume of people come in, because you can, with that many people that come here, like we saw last year, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot.
Holy moly.
Yeah, all the out-of-state stuff.
Pumpkin patch.
Yep. So that kind of complicates things, but just increasing the use that much, whether it's hunting season or you know the camping season like last year, you can have everything in order and your regulations are in place, but I don't think anybody plans for that kind of use. So it might be legal to drive down that road, but when 5,000 extra people do it, it changes the dynamics of it.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
You're
One
reacting
little puddle
daily to
Yep.
the needs of, you know, hey, we might need to close this down, or
Yeah.
we're going to open up access over here to mitigate the, you know, use of the travel
Right.
here. Okay.
So you're trying to hit a moving target with that kind of stuff. There's some basic principles, you know, we don't want to drive down this road ever. Then you have other times of the year where it's like, well, we can handle some limited traffic, but once you start to go past that, you really, it's kind of a moving target with, I guess, where you make decisions with enforcement, which makes it difficult, as you'd imagine. So those shoulders are, from what I've seen in my short time here, those shoulder seasons seem to be pretty bad. Number one, you've got people that are antsy in the spring, for example.
They just want to get up.
They want to get up. They want to get up their mountains, which is, you know, we all understand. But the road systems can't handle it, and they don't realize that the damage in the road system then carries on through the summer into the fall. You know, you start to make ruts, you start to round stuff out and destroy vegetation on the roadsides. That's not a short-term problem in a lot of places. So, yeah,
It's like going to red grade the first of spring, and
Yeah.
it's just a nightmare.
Yeah, it is.
We went to West Tensley Lake like that, down 16.
Yep.
Went 3 or 4 times last year. Different vehicles each time with different people. We got, like, out of the 3 times we went, we got a flat tire 2 times, just because that road was rough.
Pretty bad.
It was rough.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty well maintained like trailhead and camping site. Just there was a lot of traffic. We saw tons of people every time we went.
That it's definitely the road thing, because I've had times where I've gone out and the first go I'll either walk the road or I'll try and get a aerial, you know, to see how bad it is, or get on forums or get some, because other times that I just go and take the truck and it is I can't even find a place to turn around to get back, and then, you know, it's just or it might be a closure that I didn't know about until you get halfway down and you're like, oh crap, now I got to try and back this thing up.
I feel like that's where the worst that I've seen in the spring anyway. It's like people get in real far and they're like, oh, I don't want to back up another half mile. So they just go off and either don't realize how deep the snow was on the shoulder and just tear it up. It's like, man, that's not cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's difficult sometimes. I mean, just in terms of not being able to back up, you know,
Sure.
where there's single lanes. I want to say it was California one time. We were driving through, and there's like long swaths of an open road, and if you don't know that they got that gate closed way in there, it's just like, oh bummer, we got to figure out how to get it out of here.
Sure.
Do the Austin Powers turn.
You know, literally. Well,
Yep.
literally, that one was not wanting to fall off a.
Yeah.
Off a cliff.
Yep. And, you know, and all this stuff's taken into account. I mean, if you and I meet on the road somewhere and you're being reasonable, and you're
Yeah.
that's my job is to talk to people.
Yeah.
99% of it is to talk to people. What were you doing? Why and how? That there's a difference between somebody that can tell me that they got stuck somewhere and you can tell they're being reasonable, and there's somebody else who's gunning it and going through the same puddle 17 times, for Instagram. So that stuff's not that hard to figure out.
Do it for the gram.
But we're here to support people. I mean, that's a big part of it, is having those conversations so that we can see where people are coming from, because we want people out. And that's the whole point, that there's a national forest that we're part of the USDA, which the Department of Agriculture, we're meant to be used. You're supposed to pick mushrooms with a permit. You're supposed to get pine cones, collect stuff, cut firewood. The whole reason is it's agriculture. It's use. So that's why we have all those programs in place. We're not strictly protection, where if you step off a trail you're getting a ticket. Our job here is to as much as possible to have good, fair, equal use of natural resources by the public.
That's so my wife, she does photography, and we were talking about permits because there's some a case that a guy just won.
There's some stuff going on with that right now.
Yeah, and she does still photography, and so it's kind of the videography versus if you're videoing just nature, or if you're going to bring couples and disturb the trail. So there's a whole thing going there. And I was kind of in our discussion, it was more about when I go hunting, I'm not sticking to the trail. I'm off trail hunting and disturbing stuff. And so it's interesting. I think I'm interested to see where this goes in terms of like you're saying, the firewood, the filming permits, the picking mushrooms, just being able to use these resources in a responsible way. That's not too, because her big thing is she just has to call, and there's so many different regulations and people to get a hold of.
Answer on the film permitting thing, because it's basically set up as if you're going to go film dances with wolves all over again.
Exactly.
It's only set up for big production. Truthfully,
it's a. When she reaches out, she's like, I love Rocky Mountain National Park because it's $50 and you have, your criteria. Here you go. You get the thing. You're done. And she's like, I can call the day before and get it. Other places she goes, if it's a national forest or a state park ground or you got to call so-and-so, you got to call here. And so it's logistically a problem because she'll say they don't email me back or they don't call me, So it's just, it's hard, and it'll be interested to see what kind of comes out of this case, really, that kind of kicked off a big...
I'm curious. I haven't heard about this case, and as the film guy, what's the quick lowdown?
Help me out, Lee.
It looks like I don't want to butcher it, but at very, very, very high level, it looks like there's a chance that the law that's in place right now to get permits it clearly favors heavy production crews.
Yeah.
So if you and I are going to go out and Micah is going to run a camera for us, technically we could be in violation of that law because we're filming the hunt of the land that we all own, which is a funny thing. So somebody challenged it somewhere, and it looks like there's some holes in the...
Oh, there's a ton of holes. That's why people do it. I mean, coming from the big production side, anytime you needed to shoot on state land or public land or anything like that,
you just don't.
The idea wasn't... I came from the big production side. So, coming from that, you did all those permits. But you know why you did it? You did it because this might not be exactly PC or correct here, but you did it because you were going to be seen with all those trucks and all those equipment and all that, and somebody was going to call.
Right.
It's not just a dude going out in the woods and, taking pictures of elk. It's not the same.
Yeah. Well, and I look at it as if I'm leaving the same footprint. So if me and you are going hunting and we're having that same footprint, but if me and you are going hunting and I want to take a video camera and document our hunt for fun or for commercial,
I think the language is for commercial use, but that's, I think, part of the gray line is maybe Mike has got a YouTube channel that he's starting to monetize and he's getting $4 a month off of it.
Yeah.
Is that now commercial?
Yeah. I don't know that the policies and everything have caught up to technology. I don't think anybody expected this kind of,
for sure,
especially the fast growth with it. So, and that stuff's always slow to catch up.
So it'll be interesting.
Really curious. You talked about 99% of the time you talk to people. I think all of us would love to know what the other 1% is. You are a law enforcement officer. You're not just a park ranger. So
if you can talk about the craziest thing that you've seen since being in the Bighorns.
I feel pretty lucky here. This is a pretty well balanced place, which is one of the reasons I came here. So I'd say 99% of that 1% is still just talking to people, and that'll get you almost all the way. Even with the I guess more extreme stuff going on is how do you communicate with people? Because even people that are having the worst day in their life, and you're there to help them, you can change everything with how you talk to folks. And I don't think there's any way around that. I mean, you could approach it different ways, but in the both the long and the short run, that's probably going to bite the agency, the people. It's not doing a service to the public.
So how's it? You said one of the reasons you came here was it's a little more chill. Like paraphrase, but
how extreme was
so in Northern California? What's the contrast? How every weekend it's finding a new marijuana field, or what was the?
Is there a case or a scenario that you can tell us about? Like that was the craziest, Longmire tracking down the bad guy.
Not really. No. So California, again, limited experience. I've been doing this job. I was fighting fire before I got into law enforcement. I talked to somebody and say, hey, there's an LEO job coming up. So I fought fire for the Forest Service. That was my introduction to it all. And I started working law enforcement.
And what did you do for when you were fighting fire? Just so
hotshot crews, hand crews.
We should talk on that a little bit too for our audience.
Yeah, back that up.
Yeah, because that's a pretty important.
A lot of people may not know what that is. So, what's hotshot crew?
They were like me. No, so I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in I got out of the military and went back to Iowa and just knew I needed to get back to the West. Whether that was Colorado or Wyoming or California. So you're the typical guy reading the National Geographic, seeing the smoke jumper article and seeing that.
Yeah.
This was back 2002. Filled in the little bubble forms, sent the application in.
Right.
I was pretty lucky. I got on a good crew right off the bat. Vet preference helped with that kind of stuff, like it does with the federal government. But fire definitely changed how I saw occupations and life in the world.
Talk about the smoke jumpers a little bit, because
Yeah.
we might have people listening.
So
I didn't know
hold
before
on.
I moved out
I'm
west.
super interested in the date all of a sudden, because back in 2002, when I was a rafting guide, I was in Durango, Colorado, and there was a massive fire, Mission Ridge fire, and they brought in hotshot crews from all over the country to Durango to fight this fire for like a month solid.
Sure.
You didn't go to that fire, did you?
No.
That would have been amazing.
No, we were tied there. So actually, that was 2002. I was on the Sequoia National Forest at that point. So smoke jumping and hand crews are separate
Okay.
jobs. The hand crews are generally 20, 21, 22 people, drive around in trucks and do all the hand work, chainsaws, tools.
And they're fire breaking to, basically
Making a line or what
Stop.
have you.
They do initial attack, direct stuff. So the Sequoia National Forest is extremely busy for fire. It's a fantastic place if you want
They
to
just
go
have those
learn.
little trees over there.
They do.
Yeah.
So the Sequoia is actually pretty diverse. So you get down to that lower country down by, I was in the Kern Valley outside of Bakersfield on a crew down there. So that's like high desert.
Yeah, that's dry.
Chaparral brush, yeah.
Yeah.
So that same year, the McNally fire, which at that point was one of the huge fires, blew up on the Sequoia. So when you're on your home unit and that kind of stuff happens, you don't go to Colorado.
Right, sure,
Yeah.
sure. Makes sense.
Is that just the perfect situation? Okay, because I have, full disclosure, no clue about forest fire stuff. Just
I'd never seen one when I showed up for work.
Okay.
When I got a job as a whitewater rafting guide that many years ago, I had never rafted in my life.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Just read about it in a magazine and go.
Literally, the canyon that I drove to go to work for my first day was on fire that night when I drove in, and I'm just looking around. What's going on here?
First day.
way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested to know if that temperature, the undergrowth, kind of maybe management principles, or maybe arson, or just is that kind of the perfect kindling, if you will, for a problematic area? If you could speak to that and kind of what sets that apart from other places in the country that maybe, it's climate, or they get some precipitation, or, just because it seems like in the news lately, it's been, they've had a really bad,
California's on fire again.
all the things.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like I've been out of the fire world since 2009. But that place, at least from my experience there, was so California is its own thing. And that's a combination of people. So statistically, most fires are human in origin, whether it's accident or intentional.
Right.
So just the fact you have that many people in an area, if that makes sense. Vegetation and the environmental stuff is then the next inputs.
The next tier.
So you've got the Kern Valley, as I mentioned, it's Lake Isabella. It's this beautiful spot outside of Bakersfield, California. It's got everything together. It's got the brush. It's got the grasses. It's got the winds.
Okay.
So you have consistent winds certain days and strong, and it's dry. 7 to 9 inches of precipitation every year. So dry. So you get those kind of spots that just tend towards it, and then the Forest Service then of course has more resources to that area. So that was a unique area because we were in an area. I think there was 5 hotshot crews within a couple-hour drive because it was so active. We're here in Wyoming. I don't know. There's 1, 2, 3 hotshot crews in the whole state.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of anything.
Yeah.
Well, so
Gotta have forest.
was it last summer or the summer before last where Colorado was like pretty epically on fire, and you were spending a lot of time down there, if I remember right?
Right. So with any of our fire's big. Fire is where a lot of the Forest Service budget goes to, unfortunately. A lot of these programs, whether it's timber,
to protect the resource, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yep. But that money comes from somewhere, and unfortunately, a lot of other programs suffer because of that. But currently that's what you do until there's a better plan or more money. That you don't really have many options. You can't just say no and not fight the fire. So
good luck with that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I know California was bad last year. This being, like I said, an administrative unit, Colorado and Wyoming are one. There's a little bit more transfer and give resources back and forth. So my job obviously then was suppression with fire, where we go to an active fire and assist with putting it out or controlling it. So now my job is generally as law enforcement, we still get assigned to fires, and we there's a couple of different components to that. We may be assigned to the fire to work peripheral to stop additional fires. If you have a high population area, you have a major fire inside of it. What you're worried about is public safety. Number one, people going in where they shouldn't be, causing vehicle accidents on the partially closed roads, getting burned up if they're not aware what's going on, if they try to sneak in. So that's where we interact with hunters, especially in sensitive times like that. You want people to go into an area and hunt because they paid for their tags, but it's not always the smart thing to do because they're going to interact with other resources trying to put the fire out and cause problems. So we try to keep people out of closures. We enforce closure orders for the fire. We try to keep additional fires from starting. We go out and we do a lot of public contacts at adjacent camping areas where people can be in the camp. We try to make sure people don't have fires if there's fire restrictions, because all those resources are so focused on the main fire. We don't want to pull those away to deal with 13
little
more
satellite
incidents.
fire.
Right. That's not a good use of resources. So we do a lot of that.
I'm assuming if there's a major forest fire going on, like say an elk hunter, doesn't really need to be sneaking in there if it's closed, because I'm assuming the elk are running out.
He knows the big bull is coming his way, Mike. He doesn't even have to go to him this time.
I'll tell you, there was a lot of gorgeous elk within the fire closure at the Cameron Peak last year.
Oh.
Because there's no human pressure. Like the firefighters are driving the roads, going and doing their thing, but the elk just hunker in and move around. And
I didn't know how they would react, or if the smoke or
it probably varies with fire behavior and.
But the human pressure thing you said, I mean, I totally get that. That makes sense.
Especially a big forest like right out of Denver, Fort Collins. You've got that many people every day on the roads and on the trails, and all of a sudden, boom, it stops.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of what we do on fires and law enforcement. We also help management and security at the fire camps. If you've ever seen a fire camp, it's like a small city. So
for sure.
Yeah, so it's going to have its own share
set
of
up
problems.
in like a town park, or that's where it was in Durango that summer. Several of them. It was a big city.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine. I mean, stuff. I've worked in fires in Los Angeles area.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, then you got thousands of firefighters and hundreds of cops also at the location, because you've got every crime you can imagine going on in fire camp and around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
So, what were you saying, Micah?
Well, it's sad because we're talking about this resource and we're talking about the things that have gone bad, but the kind of number one factor is when there's more people, that seems to be, whether it's more fires, more crimes, you know, is people are kind of the guilty party.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, but I mean, that's what we try to do is, and I guess that's the other part of my job too, is the prevention stuff. Like, how do we educate and how do we talk? Because as we saw last year, we have a lot more, from what I understand, I didn't have a lot of experience. We had a lot more out-of-state folks. You know, I grew up in Iowa, and I came to the National Forest for the first time was when I got a job fighting fire. There was a lot of ignorance there, and that's what we try to tease out. People come in, you know, I don't expect everybody to know everything.
So the Rona caused the Griswolds to hit the National Forest. Huh? I was struggling for Griswolds.
Yeah, family vacation.
And it's good to expose people to that. I mean, just imagine, I guess, the positive of that as far as the outdoor industry, hunting, fishing. There's a lot of positive to come out of that, but we just need to be able to balance the impacts.
I saw a couple, I call them wallies, but I saw a couple wallies out last year. But I could imagine you've seen some, like you've probably just rolled up on a campsite and are like, what on earth are you guys doing?
No comment.
Man.
But we're there. I mean, that's a big part of it. You know, we do our best in the Forest Service to sign things right, try to explain things, put stuff out to the public. We have a responsibility to do that. And some places do a fantastic job, some not so much. But I mean, that's the goal, is try to improve all that so people can pull out their smartphone on their way, figure out what they need from us as far as information, and go in and recreate, do what they're doing. You know,
is there like another thing that popped in my head when you're talking about the fires and then just the problems with people and with crimes? Is there a search and rescue aspect that you're involved with at all? Me and Kaylee went up there just the other day, and well, not the other day, a couple weeks back, and there was a huge crew on that first pull off when you get up there.
What road?
When you go in through Dayton.
Steamboat Point.
Steamboat.
And there was like search and rescue vehicles, and we didn't know there's like trailers, so it was kind of like a whole command center was set up.
Off the road or something?
I have no clue. We just were, wondering if something went down.
So how does search and rescue come into play?
So search and rescue, this place is a great example. They do a fantastic job here. So again, partnerships. Sheridan County, Bighorn County, Johnson County. So search and rescue is generally under control of the county and the sheriff.
Okay.
That's where their funding, their support, their organization comes from.
Okay.
And their authority to do what they're doing. So that's an example of Sheridan County Search and Rescue going up on an operation. So that kind of stuff. Say if I'm up in the woods and I'm lost or I trip and break my ankle, whatever it might be, the notification is focused towards the sheriff's office. They call in their resource for search and rescue. Where we come into play, it's on federal property, but it's their control.
They're running point.
Right. So I guess our interest on it with the Forest Service, and this is another part of what we do, our interest in the Forest Service is to help out if we can, whatever resources we have. We don't respond people, but if they have a certain request, maybe they need additional support with horses or UTV or snowmobiles, we can support where we can with our stuff.
Okay.
We don't have an organized search and rescue team or effort that we dispatch out.
Forest Service does.
Yeah,
correct.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yep. Maybe we might have some fire resources with some medical experience and training that can assist with stuff, but that's up to the search and rescue to request us.
Okay.
And other than that, another part of my job is documentation of stuff like that. So if there's search and rescue, I will coordinate with the sheriff's office and search and rescue folks in order to determine kind of what happened. The reason I would do that is to make sure that the Forest Service maybe make sure that we're doing our due diligence for the public. We're there. Maybe if the person went off somewhere and it wasn't signed that you shouldn't go there. That's an extreme example because it's your responsibility to know where you're going. But that would be why.
Okay.
So I would find out what's going on, and I try to contact the person. Hey, how did this kind of occur, and figure that kind of stuff out.
So a lot of interagency partnerships, assisting one another, helping out here, and communicating with people.
Yep.
That's a when you
the jurisdiction thing.
Is talking about it now
is interesting. I haven't really thought about where the fiduciary responsibility falls for for what scenario.
Yep.
So one of the things that you said, if it's an ATV or snowmobile or horses, what do you have those tools at the Forest Service? Like what tools do you have? Like, what do you keep in your truck?
So here, that's always the balancing act. What do you take?
Got a horse
what do
in
you
the back
take out?
seat.
Yep. What do you take out? What do you put in as the weather changes and so on and so forth? So here, obviously, our big recreation stuff is ATV, UTV, snowmobile, and then some horse stuff.
Right.
We're lucky we've got a gentleman down at Buffalo with a ton of horse experience. So he's kind of
That's a Forest Service employee.
correct.
Okay.
He's a Forest Service LEO.
Gotcha.
So he's the other
Oh,
one.
so you're
He's
part-
got
you're-
it.
okay.
So we pull folks from all over the place for these jobs. So as you can imagine, we come in with their own kind of backgrounds and experience and knowledge. Fortunately, we've got a good crew here, so they have some of those specialized skills. Because you can imagine, you move to California, you're probably not going to ride too many horses.
Yeah.
So if you're in Florida, you're not going to be on a snowmobile. So that's that's something that hadn't occurred to me when I first started with the job. Is our job varies drastically depending on
by
where you
region.
work.
Yeah.
California, Florida, Maine, Alaska. Your outfit for your vehicle is totally different. What you wear, your clothing, you've got a standard you have to upkeep, but your underlayers, your environment, everything is so different. Your legal authority changes depending on where you might work. In California, we did additional training, and then we would be approved county by county by the individual sheriff to have state peace officer authority, so we can enforce state laws.
Huh.
So that's just an example of kind of how complex it gets. So people have simple questions. Somebody asked me that question today about something fairly simple like, what do you do when you see somebody speeding? Well, it depends on what state, what county, and what region.
Yeah, wow.
What my legal authority is at that place at that time.
So circling back to, we talked about the search and rescue and fires and stuff like that. So obviously you've spent a lot of time in the woods, Jeremy. Have you personally had any that you can talk about or anything close encounters, whether it's yourself or like you had to get somebody out of a sticky situation or what have you? Anything exciting along the lines of that?
I'm not a big fan of war stories.
All right.
No. Yeah, I mean, you're always dealing with a mix. Some people are there to help. Some people are having their worst day, and it's not their fault. And some people choose to have their worst days in the woods, and you just have to deal with that, too.
Attitude is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Yep, agreed.
Yep.
But
That's the most important thing. To me, we've talked about that a couple times on here before. It's
I
just
think
having
so.
a good attitude is paramount.
that'll
really.
get you through most of the way.
Yeah.
Well, I like what you said about before. You said, having personal responsibility. Like if you're going out there, you need to know where you're going, what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's sometimes just say kind of difference between Wyoming and California, not because they're Wyoming and California, but something to think about with, I guess, what we would deal with as a law enforcement officer. This is just an example. Here we're in not so glorious Sheridan, Wyoming. So here people live here in town, and people drive to the mountain to recreate. Where I worked my last couple locations in California, you've got the forest, and there's small towns. People live in the forest, so you get overlap of our concern is criminal stuff.
Okay.
So that's a reason like that state authority would come in useful.
Gotcha.
Because you'd have people don't go to the forest to recreate there. People live in the forest. The town's spread out. It's bordered by forest, so there's that interaction. So all the crime that takes place in town overlaps onto the national forest.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're
Okay.
going to commit a crime in or around Sheridan, like you're probably not going to drive an hour into the
Yeah,
Bighorn
correct,
National
yeah.
Forest
Yep.
and then be like,
Yeah, I mean,
So it depends on what crime
I
you're
guess,
committing.
yeah.
Right, yeah, the stuff will
fair
have.
enough.
I mean, you'll find everything in the forest you'll find in town, but you have to find it.
You have to find
So here, I mean, if you whatever crime you decide to take part in, you're probably not going to just go camping and relax and go take the kids out for bird watching afterwards. But just keeping that in mind when we talk about the different activities that take place, that was one part of California. Another part of California may be just like Sheridan, where people drive up to go. So the population
That's where
base
they-
impacts what you're doing
Where they dump the bodies.
for that.
It's gotta
Yep.
get rid of the evidence.
do you ever spend the night up on the mountain?
Not here. No, not here.
Are you prepared to do so?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you've always got a couple changes of clothes, socks, food. We're really fortunate. We're equipped well here. Most places, I mean, in-reach minis, you can communicate with dispatch
Yeah.
if things fall through.
Yeah.
It's not even just staying here. If my partner in Cody calls and said we need help, we drive to Cody and we help. So that's another thing is, I mean, we could call like a fire would break out in California. We'd all drive from 4 or 5 hours away to help because it was burning in a town. And you could take, like Redding, California, a number of years ago was burning. Everybody goes,
I remember
So,
well, we should touch on that too, because I feel like I should probably have a better refresher. You mentioned the inReach, and I know everybody hunting out now. If you're stepping anywhere remotely far off of a trail, everybody's got one now.
Yeah.
If you're not having an emergency, but say it's a I'm trying to write what's the correct term? Just
an insurance policy?
No, like a not a full blown. I don't need the chopper to get life flighted, but hey, I had a little stumble or whatever, an accident. Because this is like just stuff that I'm trying to go hunting solo with in Grizz Country, and my wife's
solo. What?
Yeah, she's not too happy about it, but
thought I was the one dragging you along.
Oh no, it's happening. if I can get the shoulder healed, but anyway. So just a protocol on that. You said it was it's the Sheridan County Emergency Response Team, and that's just
you're talking about search and rescue.
Yeah, and just walking through like the process of the inReach use for the appropriate deal. I mean, obviously, if I have a life-threatening thing, I'm going to hit that SOS. And
you kind of mean like the non-emergency number for the place kind of deal.
Yeah, like hey, my camp blew away in the storm. I'm getting cold. I'm about to have a bad time emergency, but I'm not there yet. Like maybe somebody's lost. Some of those dive into
that varies so much.
Yeah, there's so much gray area.
Yeah, there's even if you need a flight out, depending on what agency flies you out, depends on how much you pay.
Yeah.
And it varies a lot.
Well, and is it because I was even told in Idaho, if we have an emergency in a wilderness area, they're not even flying. Like you're getting horsed out. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not.
On the severity of the emergency. Everything is boils down to specific.
Okay.
Kind of stuff. Yep. Because one person's emergency can very easily be somebody else's just Monday.
Yeah. I feel kind of like what you're asking, Mike. I get what you're asking, but it's almost kind of like, okay, that's at the point I send my wife like a message on the SOS, like, hey, if I don't make it home tonight, I'm spending the night in the woods without my tent.
Well, I like to separate.
Just watch out.
I like to separate, what I'm sending to not worry or have her call and get an agency involved when I'm out there just having a great old time. So I kind of I don't know, that's kind of a half-baked question, but I felt like I was something there to
I think that's important to talk about for people though too. We've all got different lines that we cross before we get to the point where we really need help. And and where we set that's kind of an individual thing. Fortunately nowadays with technology, we have more options. You can send a text that says, I just ran out of water, but I think I get my water filter to work.
Yeah.
I don't have any food, but I've only got 2 miles out. So we're lucky nowadays with that stuff. Before, back in the day, there was no communication or there was, all or nothing.
The only communication
shooting a flare gun.
You're sending a prayer is what you're sending. Please send help.
Yeah. So I think it's important. We should all individually know where our lines are. You can't make people do that. That comes with experience. But you should, in my opinion, you should have this point where I'm no longer texting my spouse. It's either the sheriff's office or Air Force, and there's no turning back.
Yeah.
So that's
well, thank you for steering the ship, because I kind of that question was
there's a good point in there.
That's kind of what I was getting at. I think
the communication is huge because like I've been out in the woods hunting, and if I hear 3 shots, I don't think somebody's screwing an SOS. I think you're a bad shot. It's not the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, I just was thinking like the communication. When getting state agencies involved, getting search and rescue involved, that personal limit that you mentioned. So just kind of all those things were kind of going on in my head, and kind of getting that plan when you're ready to step out into the wilderness. Where it can be, life and death. easily. You fall into a mountain creek that's 40 degrees, or you slip and your mobility's gone and you can't get out, or your soul, tons of things. Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop.
What other bad stuff can happen?
Okay, sorry. I'll quit rambling on that. Yeah.
That's good though. No, I think that definitely includes the personal responsibility stuff, and it's everybody better be thinking about that.
There's a lot of cheesy sayings, but I think one of my favorites is luck favors the prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you've done some homework, know more or less what you're getting into, and you're prepared with the tools that you need to get through that situation, or could need to get through that situation. I think that's what's key, in my opinion.
That's a good way to say it.
One of the last questions for you, Jeremy, is if somebody wants to get into being a law enforcement officer with the National Forest, how do they go about doing that?
The Forest Service is, relatively speaking, a small agency, and there's nothing to take the place of personal contact. Difficult nowadays with, the pandemic situation.
Yeah.
I could just throw out the website and say, go look at the website. But really, if you're doing your homework, we get a lot of applicants, I would say, that don't really know what they're signing up for. There's probably a perception of what we do and what the environment we work in is. And again, that's drastically different depending on where you're at. So number one, I would say people should know and decide through education what we do if they really want to dig into it.
Do most people come with a pre-existing law enforcement background, like they were a city police officer and they're like jumped to the National Forest, or is it more organic with the National Forest like you did?
I would say it's pretty well balanced.
Okay.
So being a veteran in the federal system is beneficial.
Sure.
So that assists, but that's not the way in.
Okay.
We hire with a lot of diversity for the reasons I said, where our job is very diverse depending on where we're doing and what the focus is. So we get a lot of folks to come in from the Forest Service. The benefit of that is they know the Forest Service system. They know the mission, they know the relationships, they know how to do the online training.
Right.
So that kind of stuff, will make it easier for a supervisor, for example, to onboard someone. That takes a lot of stress out of the first years of employment if you can bring somebody that knows the basics.
Sure.
We do get, so I would say a good portion is Forest Service people, including fire, because that's, again, known quantities are helpful. It speeds up the application process. We do get law enforcement background quite a bit. But again, I would say that people should probably know the difference between a city law enforcement officer and what you're doing on the National Forest, depending on where you work. Some National Forests, you work very close and do very similar things. You do a lot more conventional law enforcement. So those backgrounds come in handy with that if you're in an area where that's what your issues are, if that makes sense. So that's really kind of rounds it out. We've got a lot. I say a good portion Forest Service, because otherwise people don't know we exist.
Right.
So those are the few people that do. Yep. And then.
Well, hopefully a few more people know about it now.
Is there a ride along?
That's a great question.
Is it a literal ride along on the back of a horse?
I've had some interesting ride-alongs. Lots of hiking. So we don't have a nationwide program. Most of our business with that kind of stuff is handled locally. So you could simply call up and contact the National Forest Office and tell them this is what I'm interested in, this is what I'd like to do, and how do I do it, and they can direct you to. We've got a supervisor here in Sheridan, a patrol captain.
Well, when you were talking earlier about communicating with people and talking to people, Forest Service folks that I've contacted have always been awesome, and when I'm asking about trails or roads or anything, that super helpful to talk to and work with and get me pointed in the right direction. So
I feel super lucky. I mean, like I said, I'd never even seen a forest fire, and I showed up in the middle of one, and then it turned into what I'm doing now, and I feel I'm super fortunate to be doing what I'm doing. So
that's cool.
That's awesome.
So speaking of like showing up to a forest fire and having never seen one before. Was your voice that deep before?
It actually
smoke inhalation.
First, it got way higher.
Yeah.
For certain reasons. I lowered back down once I calmed myself.
Oh man, Jeremy, really appreciate you joining us today. I think it's really cool. And
Yeah, it felt like I learned a ton.
I learned a ton. Yeah,
we have some cool people come in here, and it's always nice to like. I don't know. We get a lot of cool perspectives in here, and it's always nice to learn and feel like you came out of it and you learned something.
I'm glad you guys are doing this. So it's I've spent a lot of road time doing podcasts. I used to travel about 40,000 miles a year in my truck for work.
Wow.
So just
it's a few.
So I think the more word gets out, just like everything else, man, the more we're all talking and passing ideas, long form conversations where it's at.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, fellas.